Hello ladies and gentlemen, Top Hat Gaming Man here, and if you're watching this video you have probably been drawn in by the stupid, somewhat clickbaity question within the thumbnail, so I guess I had better answer that question now. I see the greatest retro gaming country on earth to be Great Britain, which is the sort of answer you would expect from myself, really, being the fact that I am British and a lot of the other opinions I put forward on this channel in the past, and as biased as that may sound to you, I've actually got some grounding to the argument. Obviously you've got some really good nations out there who have contributed a hell of a lot to gaming. You've obviously got Japan, who have brought companies like Nintendo, Sega and Sony to the table. And then you've got the United States as well, who have brought great companies into the mix such as Microsoft, Apple, Atari, Commodore and more. So with like literal behemoths like that, why would I believe my country is the best? Because we've got our own little scene as well. We've had companies come forward such as Sinclair, Acorn and Amstrad, for example. That's three companies who have had quite an impact on this land. So what makes this little island so special? Well, the main thing for me is diversity. You see, in Japan, because they had such big companies around, such as Nintendo and Sega, they didn't really need foreigners in their market. So their homegrown companies pretty much dominate there from the 1980s right up until this very day. In the United States, they too, for some reason, are mainly dominated by the Japanese too. Obviously, you had the North American video game crash in 1983, where Atari got blamed for killing their video game market, but after that Nintendo just swept up and dominated for a long period. Over here in the UK, as I've said many times before, we had no video game crash, so our homegrown platforms were able to flourish. American companies who couldn't hack it in the United States because of Nintendo managed to make a success over here, such as Amiga and Commodore, for example, and Atari released a decent range of microcomputers here as well. So you had the homegrown British platforms, then you had the American platforms on top of that, and then you had the Japanese companies here too, such as Sega and Nintendo, and Sega did better here than they did in North America as well. So over the 80s, this place was literally a hotbed for gaming, and it remains that way to this day, because obviously that diversity in content can still be procured. So for example, when I remember travelling around the United States, it wasn't that interesting in terms of retro gaming as it is here. Like, I used to go to retro game stores, conventions, and they all sold the same bloody thing. Mainly NES carts, a few Super Nintendo here and there, a few Genesis and a load of bloody Atari carts. Obviously they had other stuff as well, but it wasn't in abundance. And I don't recall seeing anything at all there for sale from like Commodore and Amiga and companies like that, which is kind of sad really. I didn't see any Atari ST games either, and I travelled across 26 states. So yes, the diversity is here. It's certainly a great country for gaming. And the statement I'm making got completely magnified over the last couple of days when I got to visit the United Kingdom's Centre for Computing, which is based over in Cambridge. Basically a computing and gaming museum, and I had an absolutely wonderful time. This place really did show off this nation's history and the impact of the various different companies that have came here and made successes really. So in this museum there was just an abundance of stuff to look at and play. In this place they had microcomputers even I didn't know existed, like literally a plethora of microcomputers and systems I've never seen in my life. So even for someone with a huge knowledge base like myself, I was surprised and blown away by what this place had to offer. On top of that as well, a lot of these machines, as I said, were set up and available to play. So if you are younger than me and missed out the great microcomputer days, then go over to the Centre for Computing and you can experience this stuff for a very cheap price. I believe it's only £16 entry, which is wonderful in itself. On top of this as well, if you're a little bit lowbrow and are only interested in modern mainstream platforms, they had stuff like the NES and the Master System and everything everyone's already played before. They had stuff like the 3DO setup, the CDI, so they had a little setup for mainstream games consoles of today. In fact, that section was a little bit packed out when I was there during my visit. On top of that as well, they had a really cool like office set out, so they had like an office from the 1970s where they kitted out an office to look like it was from the 70s. Basically, it looked amazing. Like I could happily write my scripts in there for the rest of my life. Fantastic little room. They had a little section actually dedicated to the North American Atari crash as well, where they actually had in a glass case a little display of Atari games that they got dug up from that landfill in New Mexico, which I found rather amusing. Actually, as well, they had a little thing in there which I found rather disturbing. They had the Sinclair C5, you know, that stupid electric car what the inventor Sir Clive Sinclair made when he drove his company into the ground. They had one of those on display, and bloody E.T. was riding it. So they had basically a display which illustrated the death of both Sinclair and Atari simultaneously, which was rather morbid, but I found rather fun. But yes, this place was literally brimming with history. So many different computers, from like huge early mainframes right up until stuff like the Amstrad CPC 464, the Dragon 32, just such a plethora of different platforms. It really did show off how many different systems you can actually game on. There are hundreds of systems in there. It's amazing, just a sight to behold, I suppose, and a lot of history in there as well, like big boards which tell you about stuff. Like it's actually in Cambridge, as I said, which was basically the hub where most of the microcomputing war took place. Well, the big part of the microcomputing war, as Sir Clive Sinclair was based there with his Sinclair brand, along with Chris Curry and his Acorn brand. And just down the road from the centre is the pub, which is still there to this day, where Chris Curry and Clive reportedly had a punch-up. And his article is quite amusing, because apparently these two big heads of these companies, these geeky heads of the companies, actually got into a fight in a pub over something, and Clive actually reportedly beat Chris Curry over the head, gave him a bloody good thrashing with a newspaper. Like, I bet nothing like that's ever happened with bloody Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, has it? See, that's what separates us Brits from the rest of the world. Like, even the people at the top, they still like to get into a little bit of a brawl when they feel aerated. You know, we just love a bit of colonisation here after all, don't we? Empire days, microcomputer days, just a rich, lovely history, isn't it? So, yes, so much history in Cambridge, so much history in this museum. And something else I'd like to touch on briefly was how lovely the staff were at this place, and so knowledgeable as well. Like, I thought I knew a lot about micros and gaming, but these people, they're on another level completely. In fact, I had a nice conversation with someone who worked on the reception desk, told them about my YouTube channel, and they were pleasant enough after that to actually invite me into the museum's archives. And insanely, the archive was actually more impressive than the museum itself. It was literally an Aladdin's cave of computer history and retro gaming. Like, I couldn't believe my eyes when I arrived up there. However, that's a story for another time, because I obviously had my camera there and I recorded everything I saw up there as well, and I had someone from the museum up there too to tell me all about their procurements. So I would advise all of you to stay tuned to this channel, because in a couple of days I will be uploading another video where this time I will show you behind the scenes in the Centre for Computing. We're going into the attic. We're going into the archives. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, Based on everything I have told you, do you agree that Great Britain is perhaps the greatest nation on earth to be a retro gamer in? Let me know in the comments section. It would be greatly appreciated. What have I perhaps overlooked? I would like to hear from all of you. Also, if you get time, try and visit this centre for computing. Whether you live over in some off-sea colony such as Novus Mundus, or down in Australia, somewhere like that, I advise you to get over to this place. It's amazing. So good. Anyway, get there. Cheerio!